Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and today is the day we finally upgrade this pink piece of trash. Keep watching to find out what with. Now, it's probably not going to be much of a surprise what I'm going to be upgrading it with, because it's more than likely going to be in the video titles or in the tags, which is why you found this video. So let's get straight on with it. First of all, let's take a look inside the PC and see what we've actually got inside there, which actually needs upgrading. Apart from the case, obviously, but the case itself functionally is okay. It's a little bit rough around the edges and it's a little bit sun bleached down the side and it's got some marks and a few dings on it. But other than that, structurally, it's actually okay. Now, it's even got thumb screws, even though it was kind of circa 2008, 2009. And no painted insides. Again, very indicative of its time. So, inside, what have we got? So let's start from the top. So at the top we've got a kind of almost generic 450 watt power supply, which actually for the build we're doing with the Athlon 200GE is going to be absolutely fine, and the whole system is going to be literally sipping power, so that is going to be more than enough for what we're doing. Now moving down to the motherboard is a Foxconn motherboard. It's an AM2 socket, so that gives you some idea of what else is in there. Now the processor, which is underneath this Cooler Master 212, is a Athlon X4 620, which I think had a quad-core processor and was probably around about 2 to 2.4 gigahertz roughly. I'm not too sure, again, it was a long time ago. Memory-wise, we've got two Kingston sticks of 2 gigs, so 4 gigs in total, which isn't a great deal, especially for modern operating systems. We will be going to be upgrading that as well, so that's not a problem. But actually we can probably sell on this old board, motherboard and processor, chip, RAM, etc. combo, just to try and get back a little bit of the cost of this. So it's not all doom and gloom, and actually for some people that still may be a viable system. So moving on a little further, so we've got a Radeon HD 4830 graphics card, which is a thermonuclear warhead of a graphics card and gives off way too much heat. Now again, we potentially could reuse that with a little bit of a fudge for the drivers for Windows 10. We could possibly get away with it, but the inbuilt Vega 3 graphics on the new chip should be more than a match for that, but we'll see how it goes. We can always reuse the graphics card if necessary. Again, possibly we can sell the card on, maybe get 10, 15 pounds for it or something. Again, something to go towards the build costs. Moving down even further, we've got a very, very old SATA hard drive. I think it's probably only a SATA 2. It's a 160 gig. It's not great, it's very loud, sounds terrible, so we're going to replace that. So the only things that we're actually going to be reusing on this build, well actually there's another thing at the front. There is an Arctic cooling fan at the front, a 120mm fan, which is going to hopefully get some air into the system because the front is pretty much choked off. There's not a great deal of airflow in this case. But again, because we're going to be going with the Athlon 200GE, it's a 35 watt processor, it's not going to be generating a great deal of heat. So chances are we may even be able to remove that fan anyway. Again, we can sell that on to try and recover some of the losses on this system. So, items we will be keeping, potentially the fan, the power supply for sure, and the case for sure, at least in the meantime. We may well change this build after, depending on how well it goes and how well it performs. We may treat it a little bit further and maybe upgrade the power supply and the case to give a little bit of future proofing, and also to add some extra USB 3 ports on the case, because how old this case is, it's got USB 2 at best. It might even be USB 1, but we've got plenty of USBs on the back, so this is not going to be a massive problem. But anyway, so that's the system. Those are the bits we're going to keep. That's the bits we're going to get rid of. So the best thing to do is start stripping it down. Okay, so that is the computer stripped out and we've given it a little bit of a clean up, so it's not looking too bad. Could be a lot worse, but at least it's nice and clean and it's ready to receive the new project. So let's introduce the parts. So first of all, we have got the Athlon 200GE. Now this is a dual core 4-thread part running at 3.2 gigahertz and uses about 35 watts of power. I'm not going to go fully in depth on the technical specs of this. If you wanted that, then you can go to Hardware Canucks or Hardware Unboxed or any of those types of channels. But basically, this is the cheapest processor I could get for the motherboard I'm going to use. Now this actually works out really well because it's very low powered, inbuilt graphics, and it's just going to do the job, but very cheaply. This is about £50 in the UK and serves as a fantastic placeholder in the system. So if you want to upgrade it at a later date, you can do, or if not, you can just carry on as is. So, Athlon 200GE. Next up is going to be the motherboard. So this is the GIGABYTE AX370M DS3H. Now this is an odd one. I bought this board as a kind of special offer deal on CCL. It was about £45 or so, but you get a mail-in rebate for Steam vouchers, which took this down to about £20 for the motherboard. So I've been looking for a justifiable reason to use this board and for something to use it on, so this is the perfect combination. A cheap board, a cheap processor, what more could you want? Now the weird thing about this is, it is a X370 chipset, but it's very low on features. Now I'll quickly go into some of those features. So that is the board itself. It's got some nice features, don't get me wrong. So you've got 4 slots for RAM, you've got a minimal heatsink on the VRMs, it's a nice looking board, you've got USB 3 headers, RGB support, all that kind of thing. But it's only got one fan header. Well, if you add on the CPU header, then there's 2, but it's only got 1 additional fan header. So it's not really designed for systems where it's going to be producing a lot of heat, or maybe with a separate fan controller. So that was one of the first things which stood out to me and said, oh, hang on, what am I going to actually use this in? Now, being that, again, 35 watt part, if we're not going to put a separate graphics card in, we're not going to need a lot of airflow, and the power supply being mounted in the top of the case is going to pull out the hot air straight off the top of that CPU anyway, if there is any, so it should keep the system nice and cool regardless. So that explains that decision. So next thing is the RAM. Now this is probably going to invoke a lot of hatred in a lot of people because this is an AMD part and they do run best with dual channel memory, but this is the only memory I have. So this is a Vengeance LPX running at, I think it's 2133, but that will overclock a little bit, maybe to 2666, which would be absolutely fine for this chip. Again, it would have been nice to have a dual channel setup, but I've only got the 1 8GB stick, so that will have to do. So that's the RAM taken care of. Now storage wise, we're going to go for a SSD. The mechanical drive that was in there is functional, it works, but it's really slow, and come on, this is 2018 going into 2019, it must have a solid state drive. So I'm going to make use of my old OCZ Arc100. This is I think it's a 240 gig drive. It's starting to show little signs of wear. It's down to about 95% of its kind of original capacity, the health monitoring. So rather than throw it out or disuse it, this machine is not going to get a massive amount of use and it's not a mission critical machine. So we're going to go ahead and put that in there and make use of it. Again, you could put a new drive in. At the moment on Amazon, you're looking at a Kingston's or A400 drive. We're about £29–30 at the moment, which is a fantastic deal. But again, trying to keep the cost down and reuse things that we've got around the house, then this is going to fit the bill. Now you're probably thinking 250 gigs, that's not a lot of storage space. No, you're absolutely right, it's not. So to make use of something else we've got lying around in the house, we're going to use this. This is the Oracle USB 3 transparent disk caddy, and inside there is a Western Digital 320 gig SATA drive. It's only a 5400 RPM drive, but for backup storage, for photos and that kind of stuff, it's going to be absolutely fine. Being that the recipient of this PC, our daughter Angel, if she wants to take her pictures out or do anything or show people pictures, whatever it may be, she can put all her pictures and stuff on this drive and take it where she needs to. So fantastic. So we can keep the pictures and videos and all that kind of stuff separate from the operating system, and hopefully that should keep things running nice and sweetly. Also, chances are there might be things like Team Fortress 2 and maybe a couple of Steam games, so again, you can put your Steam library on a removable drive quite easily these days. So that pretty much sums up all the parts. Like I said, we're going to make use of the case again. We've given it a clean, it's all ready to go. The power supply is absolutely fine. We've taken out the CD-ROM drive or DVD rewriter. We've taken out the old DVD SATA hard drive, and we're pretty much ready to go. So let's start reassembling the bits. Okay, well that was completely painless, although the stock cooler did seem to be a little bit tricky to get on for some reason. Whether I'm being stupid, I don't know. I've done this quite a few times, but it just didn't seem to want to sit straight first of all, so I took it off, put it back on, and it sits okay. Maybe the bracket was a little bit slightly out of line on the fins in there, but going on to the CPU cooler, that thing is tiny, ridiculously small. There's basically nothing to it. But again, it's a 35 watt part, so we shouldn't be expecting much. But again, if the fan is noisy for any reason, it's quite easy to upgrade and put a newer fan on. Although whether or not you want to spend 15 to 20 pounds or dollars on a new fan when the CPU only costs 50, I don't know. Probably not necessary, but we'll see what it's like. Hopefully it won't be very noisy, and chances are it won't spin very fast at all. So next thing to do is to put the back plate into the motherboard, into the case. It's quite a simple I/O shield, not a lot going on there, and nothing to actually bend on this one, which is nice. So I/O shield, safest way to do it is to put it in from behind and just use light pressure with your fingers or your palm, because there are sharp edges on this case. I think that's in okay. And at least it's silver, so it matches in nicely with the rest of this case. So let's put the motherboard in now. Now the mounting holes or mounting pillars look to be pretty much in the right place as they are already. So if I'm going to lie this down now, it'd be a lot safer to do that. So let's put the motherboard in. Okay, so the best thing to do with the motherboard is try and line up one pillar first, get that nice and centered, and get your screw in. And then hopefully all the others will be relatively straightforward and should match up quite easily. Luckily there's not a great deal on this motherboard, so there's not really actually a lot to line up. Okay, so that's the motherboard screws in, so we can go ahead now and connect up all the audio connectors, USB connectors and all that kind of thing, then start putting the power supply in. Okay, so because this case was built sometime in the prehistoric era, unfortunately there's no mounting spaces for a SSD. So we're going to have to try and wing it and put it somewhere. Now I've looked at some of the floppy drive bays and they're kind of right, but not. So I'm just going to try and put it towards the bottom somewhere, at the bottom of the case where the fan is as well. It's going to be a little bit cooler obviously because heat rises, so keeping the drive nice and cool. Now it looks like we're only going to get one screw in this drive, but again, it's a solid state drive. They're relatively robust. As long as it's secured in the case and it's not rattling around, it should be absolutely fine. So we're going to try and aim for this bottom section. Actually, if I get my screw on, this is not very easy to do one-handed whilst facing the camera. Can you see the pain on my face right now? Okay, so that's not going anywhere. Happy days. So all we need to do now is get some power to the drive and connect up the signal or the data cable, and then have a little go at cable managing this up. But essentially that is pretty much it. So I'm going to go ahead now and do some cable management and some routing, and we'll be back straight after. Okay, so that's the build all done, everything's put in. The cable management is kind of managed, but it's not perfect. Ideally a modular power supply or somewhere to hide the cables would be much better, but we just cable tied them out of the way for now. So hopefully that's going to do the trick. So I've wired it up to the monitor there. This is the first boot, hopefully it's going to work. Fingers crossed. I've got a wireless keyboard, so this may not actually go into BIOS, but we'll see what happens. So here we go, first boot. Get ready to mash the delete key. Well, we have a power LED and there are signs of something going on in there. It's very quiet though. I'm not even sure if there is a hard drive LED. I'm sure there must be, but I can't see it. First boots always take ages. Although I have put the RAM into slot 2, which is traditionally the right one for APUs. So we'll see. Maybe it's not in this particular case. This is the point of RTFM. Technical errors, unfortunately. Now we changed the RAM slot from slot 2 to slot 1, and looks like that's done the trick. So let's try and get into the BIOS. It's pretty quiet. Although the noisiest thing in there at the moment is the Arctic fan. Although that's calmed down now, so there's a little bit of airflow, so we're mashing the delete key, and there we go. We're into the BIOS. Happy days. So BIOS has been reset. Please reconfigure your BIOS setup items if needed. So we can go ahead and set up the BIOS and do all the things we need to do in there. Install Windows and then do some benchmarking. So if you want to see the video of me installing Windows on this, click on the subscribe icon, which is somewhere down there, and the bell icon, and you'll be notified of when I do it. Also, again, if you want to see the benchmarks and see how this thing actually performs, then again, click on the subscribe icon. So I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To. This at the moment seems to be a relatively successful upgrade, but we'll see in the next video when we do the install and setup. So I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To. This has been upgrading the pink piece of trash into something which is a lot more sexy. Thanks for watching.